Welcome, everybody, to the Law Department Operations Survey webinar discussion. Today's topic, or today's title at least, AI Success Stories, How Leading Legal Ops Teams Are Operationalizing AI for Value. As always, we take data points from the, in this case, 18th Annual Blickstein Group Law Department Operations Survey. We'll share them with you. We'll discuss them amongst ourselves. To the extent that anyone wants to ask questions or enter anything in the chat, please do. You all know how to use Zoom webinar by now, I hope. I'm your host, Brad Blickstein, Chief Executive Officer of Blickstein Group and the folks who've been putting on this survey for so many years. We have really an outstanding faculty with us today of people who are, I would say, as expert as anyone is on the use of AI in law departments. We have with us Laurie Ehrlich, Vice President, Legal Product Management at Icertis. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, happy to be here.
Diane Homolak, who is VP of Technology Solutions at Integreon. Hi, Diane. And Mike Ferrara, Managing Director, Legal Ops Consulting at FTI Consulting. Hey, Mike.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining today.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I think we're in for, well, I think in the world that we live in, we're in for a wild ride. So I want to talk a little bit about our survey. Every year we do this. Again, this is the 18th annual survey that we are talking about today. We ask you all, our audience, about 100 questions that could be divvied up into 300 data points, all to provide critical success factors of effectively managed law departments. When we first started this thing, the letters AI did not appear in the survey. That is no longer the case, as it is just an important topic for us all to face these days. We have an amazing advisory board that helps us with our survey. They don't get much out of this other than recognition whenever we can, so we do like to thank them whenever we have the opportunity. We also have some great sponsor partners who help us every year. What we've learned is that, and you'll see this right on this call, that the folks who are, I guess, technically considered sponsor partners are often the people that really understand this stuff better than anybody. So we're excited to have them on our team. We're going to talk about 3 buckets worth of topics, I guess, today. One, who has actually operationalized Gen AI. 2, we're going to talk about the balance between usability and security. We're going to talk about where legal ops teams might already be seeing some real value. And then I'm going to ask each of our panelists for a final thought. Again, you have questions, ask them. You have comments, chat them. So let's start with this very first data point. I think this is really interesting. We asked our audience to select at which stage could best describe where they are in their Gen AI journey. And we get a few different choices here. That almost everyone has done something. Very few said that they were yet to start anything meaningful. I guess we could probably spend a whole hour talking about what meaningful means in this context, but we probably don't need to. Some are exploring, but most have at least piloting something, or say that they have something fully operational integrated. And I just want to point out that the survey was in the field in late 2025. So a lot of this may have changed already, likely has, considering how quickly things are moving these days. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about this? Is this aligned with what you're seeing out there?
Sure. Yeah. I'll happy to kick it off, and then I'd love to hear what Laurie and Diane have to add to this as well. I mean, your point about this being a late 2025 survey and likely some of this changing is probably correct. If you're like my LinkedIn feed, everyone is piloting, so 100% of organizations are piloting. But in my work, I talk to quite a bit of organizations that align with what may seem like a surprising statistic, that maybe a quarter of the population here either haven't started at all, or they're actively exploring, but they really haven't tested anything. So I guess that's not so surprising to hear, because I do talk to a lot of customers that are in that same tranche, so to speak. I think, to me, one of the biggest reasons why that might be is there is a tremendous amount of choices in the market. And for a lot of organizations and for a lot of leaders, that just makes it so that they somewhat sit on the sidelines, right? It's kind of a chilling effect for a lot of organizations, as we've heard it, where there's just so many solutions, so many choices that, of course, they want to try something. But the moment you try something, there's 50 other things that show up the next day. And it just creates a lot of friction in the decision-making process, especially for organizations where the budget cycles are very long and you just don't have the ability to be very nimble. So I would say some of this does look surprising, but it's actually not, at least in my estimation. Last thing I'll say, and I'll kick it over to the other panelists, maybe the 23% saying that generative AI tools are fully operational, that actually is very surprising to me. Now, the term fully operational is obviously a loaded term too. Like that could mean anything. But I actually would be very surprised to see that that's the case, just because I've not talked to a lot of organizations that would claim to say that they're fully operational or fully integrated.
I
So,
agree with
Laurie,
you,
Diane, what do
Mike.
you think?
I agree with you, Mike. In talking to our clients, 100% of them have had a conversation with us. So yet to start anything meaningful doesn't mean that at least a conversation hasn't taken place. The 50% that are in pilot and testing, that tracks pretty well to what we're seeing. And the ones that are deploying and operational, I'd say that feels a little high to me as well, particularly the integrated into our department. I think there are things that are turned on, but that integration piece, looking at it holistically into the processes and how the department functions, I'm not seeing a lot of maturity in that piece of it. So the integrated word kind of throws me on that. Yeah, a lot of things turned on, things turn, get running, but not well integrated. That's what I'm seeing so far.
I think it's how you think about integrated. Does integrated mean connected across systems, or does integrated mean it's part of how we as individuals each work on a day-to-day basis? So
Yeah, on an individual basis, yes. Am I using it part of my day-to-day? Maybe. I was thinking about it organizationally and fitting it into bigger processes, and I'm not seeing that to the degree
yes,
that I see.
I think we're all still at the kind of beginning stages of that integrated in terms of its ability to de-silo the organization and connect teams together and integrated workflows. I think we're all kind of at the beginning of AI as a system as opposed to a tool. But I do like most of the teams that we talk to, even though the prospects that we talk to are not yet using us, but they still almost all at this point are using some form of AI in their day to day, and they want to know how we're different from the AI that they're already using.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of that boils down to a question of, like our folks being strategic or tactical or just opportunistic in how they use some of these tools. And so we asked that question. We asked, how sophisticated is your legal AI strategy? And pretty much a flat curve here amongst the five answers, which is somewhat interesting. But basically, we defined legal AI strategies. It should have enterprise-wide AI tools, guidelines for use, and a future roadmap. About 11% say they have none of that. About 20% say they have all of those elements, and everyone else sort of somewhere in between. They have some of those elements. So I think that's that, which again I think aligns largely with where the industry is and where the industry thinks it is. Just as a sort of a table setting thing here, we ask our folks, our respondents are all in-house legal operation professionals. They all work for corporate law departments. And we ask the top legal ops person in the company to be the one who responds to the survey. So that's the respondent set. Most say that they are, I would say most say that they are the stakeholder for the legal department. Some, actually about 90% say that, but some also either advise or are the stakeholder for AI throughout the entire business, which I think is really interesting because I don't think that was ever the case. Like I've been looking at legal tech for 30 years now. I don't ever remember a case where like the legal department was in any way responsible for tech outside of the legal department, other than maybe some specific privacy concerns or something like that. So guys, I don't know, Lori, maybe you want to kind of kick us off this time, but like, where does that leave us? Like, are we being strategic? Are the right people involved? What's happening?
I personally think AI governance is a cross-functional matter. And I think a lot of it companies, AI is about data, right? It, it AI without data is not really doing as much as AI with data. And so it really comes to I think it entered a lot of organizations, and what do we do with this through that data governance lens? And fortunate for most organizations, they already had a team addressing data governance, which is usually in the companies that I've been part of, data governance is usually legal, privacy if it's a separate group, IT, security. And then if you have sometimes organizations have a standalone data governance team. And so a lot of what I saw is that's where AI governance started in companies that already had that structure for privacy. But I think that legal being part of the conversation is really essential for the organization, and it makes me happy to see at least around a third, more than a third, are part of that broader business decision making around the use of AI. And I think it's going to become, as we talked about, that idea of integration and AI as a system connecting our departments and having workflows with agents. I think AI governance is going to become more and more important. And I would say, like, any legal team that's not yet thinking about agentic governance as opposed to AI governance, and I think there's a material difference there, I think should be working on it now.
I totally agree. I think, Brad, to answer your question or your thought about, like, you couldn't think of a time where legal had been maybe at the forefront other than privacy. To me, that was the kind of hasty, response to, like, hey, we need an acceptable use policy for the organization. And so let's get legal to opine on what should be in that thing. And good, better, and different, that was a great way to get legal in front of the right folks within the organization to show really what their value could be and what should be as the shield to the organization across broader domains. I think outside of legal, you're probably right. Like, you don't really see the same type of impact with other departments within an organization maybe being put up, as like, hey, we're the champions for AI use and how to use it, properly. So I do think it's a great opportunity for legal to, as Laurie said, like, to kind of continue to push the envelope there as being part of the value of the organization, and using AI is a great way to do that, and showcasing maybe, hey, well, here's what we've done with AI. And if we can do it with legal, surely we can do it with sales and marketing and other, departments.
Yeah, I think the privacy and confidentiality concerns that drove the initial use of legal or tapping into legal for supporting processes in the other businesses, that's a natural extension into the AI space. And I think folks that had their eyes opened in the privacy area kind of continued that and said, wow, AI is touching those same things. They're seeing the same kind of concerns, whether it was open network when we, were doing, the last round of, we all went open source, or we all went on distributed systems, whatever the last list of concerns were. AI is opening those same doors in different ways. And so we're having legal at the table is a natural extension of that. And I think you're going to see it grow, because the concerns are very genuine, and it's only going to take one bad breach to wake up everybody else. And it's a little bit like the San Andreas fault. Is it going to happen, or we're just going to worry about it, but we know it's out there? I don't know, but it's only going to take one to put it into a big tipping zone.
And just to frame that a little bit, when you talk about breach, when you're talking about AI, with privacy, for the most part, we're really talking about external, outside of the four walls of our company. But with AI, you're talking about data leaking to people within the organization that shouldn't see it. So for example, like, I've heard a lot of stories about, companies that have put in Copilot, which, can sort through Microsoft Copilot, which can sort through all of the stuff you have on SharePoint and emails, and people before this weren't necessarily careful with putting their permissions in the documents. And so there's a lot of stories about people all of a sudden in the organization having access to materials that you wouldn't have wanted them to have access to, because Microsoft Copilot has made it possible to discover things that you didn't know were there. And so there's a lot of potential data leakage even within the organization that you wouldn't want to happen. And then when we go into agentic workflows, there's obviously the possibility, just like humans make mistakes, agents can make mistakes too. And so you have potential agentic action that leads to data leakage that isn't supposed to happen. So we're not just talking now about third parties breaking into the system or having more access points to access data. We're also talking about internal actions that lead to data loss or bleeding even within the organization.
Yeah, very much so.
So we talked a little bit about workflows and agentic. We have a couple data points there, and maybe we can then, I'm hoping we can dig in a little bit more about what all that means and what it takes to start thinking more strategically and building workflows and using agentic AI. So I believe most in-house teams will have AI seamlessly built into their workflows. About 70% of our respondents agree with that statement in one way or another, most in-house teams. But 30% do not agree, do not believe that most in-house teams will have AI seamlessly built in. And then one more before we pause for a second. Wide majority are actively considering tools that leverage agentic AI. And again, we were in the field back late last year. This number might be even higher now, although on the other hand, it might be even lower. It might be a little lower now because it seems like late last year, all we were talking about was agentic AI all the time. It was sort of the term of the day. It was in the zeitgeist, and I don't. Maybe we're not talking about it quite so much anymore. But Diane, you've talked about this a little bit. I've heard you talk about it before. We talked about
this one kind of makes me chuckle because in some respects, I think you have no choice but to answer yes, because there's virtually no tool out there right now that isn't calling itself an agentic tool. So if you're looking at a tool, you're looking at an agentic tool, whether you actually are or not. When you peel back the covers, maybe not, but everybody's advertising that way. So I am surprised it's not 100 because it's almost inevitable. I think the bigger question, and Mike, I know you're into this concept, what really is the agentic? And do people understand that there's agents which do tasks, and then there's agentic workflows, which is stringing tasks together to make them do an end result? And are you looking at a tool that's just giving you discrete activities? Are you looking at something that's stringing those together to give you a process? Are you looking at building true end-to-end workflows with agents and people interacting seamlessly across? I think we're in that continuum. I don't think we've reached the pinnacle of that, but I'm not sure everyone understands what that goes to. So not surprised by the answer, but not sure everybody's where that means. Mike, I know you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, even for me, I've spent my whole career in technology. I used to be a very bad developer, hung those cleats up a long time ago. So I know about code, I know how to read code. But I guess even for me, I study this stuff all the time. I'm constantly trying to keep up with things. Even with agentic, it is tough to know, like, well, what really is an agentic workflow? What does that mean? I've heard a lot of users when they just kind of peek behind the curtain in any of the frontier chatbots and see, essentially the reasoning chain that's happening when you ask it a question. A lot of people think that's agentic, right? Oh, great. I can see what's happening behind the scenes. And so I think, as always, there's word salad, in our industry, and it is very hard to separate the marketing side of things, which drives a lot of decisions, and the actual solutioning side of things. And I'm hoping that the industry moves more to like the solutions-based approach here, where we actually get into this more deeply and say, okay, do you actually need an agentic workflow for all these things? As we've talked about so many times in the past, like so many things can be solved with regular workflow, right? Just robotic processes that maybe tap into a chat feature to extract something out of a contract or do a thing, but does it need to be a full end-to-end agentic process? Because to me, an agentic process needs to have the decision-making angle on it, right? It needs to be able to have a goal and understand how to execute on that goal. And to me, I feel like we're not there yet with legal, right? We're not ready to hand the reins over to an agentic process. So what do you think, Laurie?
Well, we do have customers that are using agentic processes today with workflows. So I do think some people are there in the legal space. A lot of it's around, the questions that legal typically handled, where the legal team has great documentation that gives the chain of reasoning to make that determination. But it's the business person reaching out with the facts of the situation, and the agent reading those facts and looking at those instructions and deciding how to answer that question, which I think is truly a decision-making agentic workflow. Same with triage, routing of contracts. But I love what you raised about, like, does it need to be an agentic workflow? And I think what we should be seeing in the future is that it's a mix. You have agents at certain points in your workflow, and other points are just workflow encoding. And one of the things I loved, for those of you that there's a breakfast in New York that happens once every other month or so, the Legal Tech Mafia breakfast, that Ari Kaplan runs. And one of the attendees once said, he did legal ops, and he said that what he really loves about AI is all of a sudden legal professionals are like, oh, there are technical solutions that can help me. AI can help me do all these things. And so they've come to him and saying, like, hey, I heard AI can help me with XYZ. And he's like, well, maybe, but also you could just do this basic thing that's existed for the last 10 years that you've never asked me about. And so I think, we were talking before everyone joined today about choosing the right tool for your problem. And I think that that's really where we need to step away from discussing AI for the sake of AI and really talk about what are the problems that we have, what are our pain points, what do we want to achieve. And I think what AI has done is what do we want to achieve can just use your imagination. Like, there really isn't anything that we're not going to be able to design for in the future, and you just have to decide which dream do you want to see come to fruition, and that's really what's different. But once you figure out what that pain point is or what that vision is for the future, then you have to figure out, like, what is the mix of tools that you need to get there. And some will be AI, and some is just going to be software code, and some is going to be existing tools that we have today that you just can now leverage in a different way, or even the same way.
So here's what I wonder is, like, I think about the person you just mentioned, the legal ops person who is being asked, can we do this with AI? And, like, what does it really matter? Like, what if you just said yes? Like, is the lawyer going to be like, oh, wait a minute, hold on, that's not really AI, that's just a robotic workflow, like, you can't fool me, so it reminds me of, like, before Gen AI, you'd always end up these conversations about AI, and someone would say, that's not AI. And I would be like, well, I'm not talking to you anymore. Like, I don't care. Like, what does it matter to me? Like, does it work? So, are we overthinking and sort of over-indexing on the marketing around agentic AI when really it's still just workflows, right?
I think this has always been a problem, Brad, in that when folks looked at technology or went to their IT organization and said, I want to use this tool, the question back from IT was always, what are you trying to do? Because the idea is what you're trying to do matters more than what tool you're using to do it. And I think the AI is the same thing. I want to use Claude, or I want to use ChatGPT, or I want to use Copilot. Okay, what are you trying to do? And depending on what you're trying to do, one of those might be a great choice, or to Mike's point, something else might be better. And so going back to what are you trying to accomplish is the ultimate question, but it's been a question that's posed through IT for as long as I can remember for every tool that comes on the market. I want to use X. What are you trying to do?
Yes, I think that's right. And also, Brad, to your point about does it matter to the end user what technology you're using? And I'm going to say historically, maybe not, but I do think it should matter today, because how you treat the tool should be different if it's an AI tool versus a non-AI tool, because of how AI works, right? Like, software is more deterministic. AI is probability. And so I know if I use a calculator and I put 2 + 2 = what, it's going to give me 4 the same exact way every single time I do it. And AI just is not at that level of exactly the same every single time. And so you have to understand, as the legal professional, what can I count on? What do I know is right without having to check it? And what do I need to actually look at critically? And so I do think it's very important to know whether the answer you're getting is coming from something that's deterministic or not.
I think you're right in that whatever tool they end up selecting in the joint conversation, that you have to consider those things for absolutely true. And that is really the issue that it boils down to is come to me with what you want to do. We'll pick out the best things together to what you solve it with, and then let's look at the concerns that option opens up, and what do we have to think about in choosing those options, because some things, like you said, will be more risky than others. Yeah.
The one thing I do love about this time period, though, is that for all those concerns, and I totally agree with what you're both saying about risk, like adding risk to these use cases is like a must-have. We can all build these things now, right? Like you can iterate and do these things in days and weeks now, when not that long ago it used to be, well, let's do a
Hours, Mike,
selection.
hours.
Hours, yeah, we could vibe code it while we're doing this webinar. Yeah, I mean, so I think that's probably the most exciting part about it, is that, sure, let's pressure test it. Let's see if we can build it this week. And if it doesn't pass the sniff test, let's move on.
Great. That's actually probably a pretty nice segue to our next overall topic, about security and usability. For the first time ever, this year, usability snuck ahead of security as the top concern for our respondents. But let's set a little bit of framework here first. We asked, what are your top concerns? The top concerns your AI strategy is built to address. And again, people, for the most part, what is in your AI strategy was pretty middling. People that's a relative semi-immature place, regardless. But I think we allow them to answer this 3 times at least. They give 3 answers here, maybe more. But usability directly is the number 1 answer. But security is not far behind, and quality is up there too. And what I think is maybe also interesting, we'll get to this, is meeting C-suite expectations. We're definitely in a place where like law departments are under pressure from the C-suite to do something in a way that generally I don't think has been the case before. So I don't know who wants to kick this off, maybe Diane, but what is this?
Yeah, I think you've got another slide too, Brad, that talks to what are we trying to accomplish? And I think what we're trying to accomplish with our outputs is moving toward the quantitative. So we want to get efficiency, we want to get cost savings, we want to get tangible results from these things. So it is not surprising that usability falls to the top of our response, because usability drives adoption, adoption drives results. And if we're results focused, then we have to start with usability, because if the tool isn't usable, nobody's adopting it. If nobody's adopting it, we're not getting results. Security is wonderful once we've got people engaged enough to say, yeah, we're going to use it. Okay, now let's worry about how you're going to use it. But I've got to get you engaged enough that it's going to actually be used. And then when I've got that sort of locked in that that's going to happen, then you get the attention on the security piece of it. So it's not that it's less important. I think it's a timing issue and a focus issue. I got to get everybody going in this direction and having my output achieved. And then, yes, let's make sure that output is secure.
I think that's right.
That's surprising.
I don't know if anyone on the call is familiar with G did the study on what led to people moving forward in their career. And they looked at, it's called the PI study. They looked at performance, image, and exposure. And when you think well, how do you get ahead? You think, oh, well, you have to do a really great job. And they found that performance is only 10% of the measure of what enables someone to succeed, and that image and exposure are much more important. Security to me is like that 10%. You have to have it, right? If you don't have good performance, you're not going to move forward in your career. If you don't have security, it's just not a usable product, because it won't be permitted in the organization. It's too dangerous. But usability is part of that that image and exposure. Like if we bring this tool in, will it actually get used, or is this going to sit on a shelf?
I think it's a good analogy.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. The other one that I keep thinking of is like for most of my career, the way we've always done technology implementations is like the traditional way. Like if you build it, they will come, which means a lot of design work and painful sessions and sussing out all these requirements. And of course now this is just buy it and turn it on and throw it out there. And it's a magical sandbox of use cases that you could just do. And I
Not
think we
magic.
found
AI is not magic.
yeah, that's true. That's a bad word. I think what we've seen is a lot of people feeling that usability crunch issue, which seems like the opposite, right? It seems like, well, wait, how could you have a usability problem? These are so easy to use. It's literally just a chatbot. We've removed all the friction possible to use a system to literally just make it a chatbot, and yet we're still kind of at the same juncture, which I find totally interesting. But it's true. It's if you give somebody ultimate power, that's a possibility, but it's not a structured way of doing things, whether it be use case or just some kind of workflow. It does kind of make people tend to just say, I don't know, maybe I'll use it if I feel like it.
I think, we were talking about this before. We're always looking at how can we help our customers to adopt our tool more effectively. And the thing that is a recurring theme is our customers are like, we need to understand what the use cases are. What are the use cases? And what we were talking about before is that the problem is we're thinking about it like a tool, right? If you buy a traditional CLM, you can use it for XYZ, and that's what you can use it for. And it's not a do anything with a tool. And I think we need to change our mindset around AI and make it more like you figure out what your needs are as an organization, and then you figure out how you're going to staff for those needs. Bringing in AI is like bringing in additional team members. And what team members do you need? What work needs to get done? And which team members are best suited for that work? And I think if you think of it that way, I think it's a little bit easier to unlock the idea of use cases. Because I could sit here and I could write 100 pages of things you can do with Vera Engage, which is our tool. But I mean, that's not a useful thing for me to share on a call. It's really about what the what your needs are. And again, it's a flexible tool. You just have to know what you're trying to solve. What are your pain points? What are your goals? And go from that point rather than go from what the tool can do because of the flexibility that AI provides and the ease of use.
Well, I think a good place to start for that is, what are you doing today? I mean, you're doing work today. What part of that work is not fun or is taking time or it feels like I could be more efficient doing this some other way? You just have to pursue that kind of gut reaction to the activity that you're doing today. And there's a really good chance that there's something that could be built that can help you with it. And
But it's almost like people need a like work life coach of like, hey, like here's some things you could do to make your day better. Let me show, like it sounds silly, but like I do think people benefit from like, hey, I've done this for 20 years the same way. I'm really good at that thing and I'm just going to keep doing that thing. And we're trying to say, no, don't do it that way. You could be so much more efficient. It is very hard to get people to see that without having someone like right alongside them and working at it in kind of hand, white gloves is what we used to call it, but I would say partnering is probably the better word.
well,
It's funny.
go ahead, Laurie.
I was going to say, Diane, what you said before about the what do you do? What we usually do is we show people how to use the tool, basic instructions, and then we have our check-in. And I'm like, oh, do you want to use it? Everyone's like, oh, I was really busy. I didn't have, blah, blah, blah. And so we're like, well, what were you busy with? And then they tell us, and then we show them how they could have used Vera Engage to do it. And their eyes open. They're like, oh my God, that would have saved me so much time. And that's really like that to the exact point. The use case discovery is just think about what you do. And what I say is like when we first introduced our chatbot, even though I helped build the chatbot, I still had to put a post-it note on my computer as I did my legal work that said "Start with AI" because I had to break my habit of not using AI and create a new habit of using AI. And that's really, I think, what it's discoverability, right? The ability to just like go and do and what you actually did before. But you imagine you have a team member sitting with you and you can ask them to do any part of your work. What do you want to ask the team member to do?
Usability also sometimes has to do with expectations. We look at the AI and we say, well, it should be able to do X for me. Well, maybe you don't need it to do all of X, and it's not going to do all of X perfectly, but it can do a piece of it that's a pain in the neck that's done for you, that's a piece of your process. The organizations I've seen that have worked best with their outside counsel and AI is not replacing their outside counsel with an AI lookup tool or with, whatever, but setting up the work so that it is that much further defined, that much further progressed, that by the time they give it to the law firm, it's going to bill less hours. It's going to be more efficient. It's going to turn faster because you've given them such a more advanced starting point. And the AI can help you do that. The AI is not going to replace your outside counsel, but it's going to give you a much better interaction with them if you let it meet them part way. And I think that's true with a lot of the work we do. Let the AI get you on your path. It doesn't replace you in the path. It doesn't replace the judgment and the things like that. It's not going to do the job for you, but the idea is to make you better doing at the job.
Outside counsel, I think, is actually how best to think about what you could do with AI in legal. If you could send it to outside counsel to do, you want to instruct AI the same way, right? Your outside counsel has X much context. You have to give it the rest of the context. You have to tell it how you want to have your output, right? Like if I just tell the number of times I learned my lessons very early on working with outside counsel, I'd say, hey, I have this question. And then they would give me a 10-page memo, which was completely useless to me because I really just needed a one-word sentence, a one-line sentence on the answer, right? So AI is the same way. So if you think about how you work with outside counsel, you can work with AI exactly the same way. You give outside counsel the context, you give AI the context, you tell it how you want the outputs, and you get what you want.
And I think in a lot of cases, the AI is exactly as good at listening to the context you put it in and trying to reduce things down for you as your outside counsel are.
I think it's better.
Which is to say, not always so much. And one, I'm going to take sort of the final word on this topic, if it's all right. But one thing that I think we concern, because as legal ops people and as legal technologists and process people, we always think in terms of workflows and processes and I think a lot of times, in some ways, sometimes the lawyers are ahead of us in like extracting value from some of these tools, especially the chatbot-like tools. Then we think like, I have a friend, he's a partner at a big law firm. And we had dinner and he says, what do you think of one of the big two players in the legal AI space that we've all heard of? And if you haven't heard of them, you'll see them on a billboard near you soon. And I said, well, do you have it? He goes, yeah, it's on my desk. I'm like, what are you using it for? He goes, sometimes I need a document summarized, or sometimes I want a quick and dirty first draft, or I need an email written for me, or I need, whatever, something kind of done. And I said, okay, that sounds all right. Did the firm sit you down and say, here are some good use cases, like here's some things you should use this for, and here's some things we can help you build? He said, no, none of that. And I said, are they evaluating like what you're doing with it so that you can, they're like, no, we're not going to do it. None of that. And I said, well, what if they took it away? Like, how would you feel if they took it off your desktop? He's like, oh, I wouldn't like that at all. Like, I really like having it. I use it all the time, so like sometimes I feel like our need as operations people to sort of be like definitional and process oriented and tracking, sometimes doesn't align. That doesn't mean that the lawyers aren't getting value out of using these tools. My friend Joe's getting tons of value, just not documented in any way. So anyway, so let's move on. A couple more data points I want to share. Let's move a little bit towards security and protection and security, privacy protection. I found this pretty interesting and surprising and better than it used to be, in that most of our audience now trusts their law firms to protect their data. This was not true all that much years ago. It was closer to like a third or a half trusted them to protect their data. Interestingly, this don't know number has fallen substantially over the past few years. It used to be a high number of people said they didn't know, which always, to me, that was more terrifying than saying that the law firms were ineffective. Like, if you don't know, go find out. But I don't know. And then, but on the other hand, they're not necessarily so trusting it's middling in terms of their comfort with this doesn't mean they're outside counsel, but they're the lawyers that are both inside and outside using the Gen AI rules. So where does this leave us? Like, if you're a legal ops person, how much faith do you have? Let's keep picking on my friend Joe. Like, how much faith do you have on my friend Joe, the 50-something-year-old law firm partner or general counsel, to actually, like, do this stuff properly and protect data and use these tools?
I think this one goes to where are they playing? If Joe is confining his inquiries to an environment that you've established for him in a tool that you trust, that has its own safeguards and things like that, as far as, how far out in the world he can get, then your comfort level with his use is going to be higher. If your organization is relying on everybody kind of using their own version of Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever they've walked in the door with, you should be very nervous, because they might be very good at using it, but you don't have the controls in place to be able to know that it's being used properly. So I think a lot of this answer and the comfort level probably comes from what are people being given to use? Am I controlling you in my environment, or am I truly trusting you to do it on your own? And I would hope most people are gravitating towards an environment that makes sense.
I wonder, like, I'd love more granularity. I always feel like I want more granularity. It's just the data geek in me. But like, for me, I wonder, comfort has so many different layers to it. So is it comfort with their lawyer's ability to successfully use Gen AI tools? Is it comfort with how the lawyers are using it, what they're choosing to use it for? Is it comfort with like how it's going to change what we do, right? So there are all these studies about how like lawyer plus AI is better than lawyer alone, but lawyer plus AI then minus AI is a worse lawyer, right? There's the I think for me there'd be a lot of fear of like, are my lawyers are they getting lazy, right? So I have my own tips to keep myself from getting lazy. Like we have a tool that will automatically redline, but I don't use, like, I use the tool to automatically redline, but then I read through the document as if I had gotten it from another person, and don't rely just on looking at issue cards in my tool, because I know if I don't read the contract end to end, like I always used to read the contract end to end, I'm going to get lazy. And so I just wonder, when people respond to what's your level of comfort, are they talking about the lawyers making good use of it? Are they talking about what the lawyers are doing with it? Are they talking about what the effect of the lawyers' use is on the outputs of the department as a whole? There's a lot of different ways you could go with that.
Yeah, I will say that in the survey itself, this question is paired with one that we didn't cover here, but what is your level of comfort with your own use of Gen AI tools? And that's, of course, a lot higher. But I think the reason I'm bringing that up, Laurie, is because I think that a reasonable person would infer from those two questions together that we're talking more about inputs than, we're not talking about like existential, are the lawyers doing a good job, as much as like, are they causing hallucinations that are going to get us all fired?
I was thinking, it's like the marriage. Like, how many times am I right versus my husband? I think I'm right way more often than he is.
Well,
and
if
also, he's as smart as I expect he is, he probably thinks the same.
Go ahead, please, Ben.
I was just going to say, Diane, the correlation you had on the prior slide, I think firms have had to be forced into increasing their cybersecurity posture, related to why they're, better at protecting their data, right? It's a very different problem, right? They've had to guard against a significant amount of external threats, from foreign nation states and outside attackers, trying to get their data. And so essentially they've built a bunch of walled gardens now, and that's pretty good. I would say very effective now at that. This is such a different issue, right? Now we have we're coming back to like, it's not really an insider threat, but I think the hallucination topic you just mentioned is 100% the concern, right? We're reading it in the news on a weekly basis at this point, right?
I also think sometimes it's experience-based. The comfort level that you respond with might be subject to the latest experience you've had. A friend of mine in a law firm was telling me about a story that they were all excited about AI. They were using Copilot. They were using, doing good pilots and things like that. And they would have answered this question really, really high, that everybody was really working well and on. And then last week, they had an associate that failed to check citations on a court submission, Judge came back, sanctioned the firm, reamed out the lead counsel that was governing the associate, and the associate got fired. If you ask them that question today, they have no comfort level with anyone using it. Everybody's a risk. So again, it only takes one bad action to kind of pollute that scoring. So the fact that it's actually pretty high, I think it goes back to those controls. I think most environments are not letting people just run wild with it. They're using it in controlled environments, and for the most part, they feel like people are getting their feet.
So we only have about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to cherry pick some slides, some data for the rest of our discussion. But I want to talk about this one for sure, which is shadow AI. And when we were in the field, again, late last year, about 70% believe that shadow AI is an increasing problem. It sort of terrifies me, right? Like, what if it turned out that associate had used Claude or something unauthorized by the firm to get that answer? Now where are you? Like, how do you even figure out that that's what happened? So how big a problem is shadow AI, and what do we do about it?
Maybe I'll start with just saying one brief thing, and then I think the genesis of this is, of course, shadow IT, which we've all seen for many, many years. And the reason why shadow IT exists as a phenomenon is because of organizations being too slow to adapt to things that are better, right? Like, we've all grown up with devices and smartphones and stuff well before we got it in the business world. And I think we're seeing that repeated now on a exponential scale, where on a daily basis we have AI tooling that far surpasses what you had even the last day before. And so organizations having to keep up with that is going to be very, very difficult. And of course, the answer of just blocking every tool that you don't like is not good either, because people will just find a way around that too. They'll just email themselves the documents, go on their computer. So I think this is probably one of the biggest problems organizations have, and they have to really completely rethink their balance towards, well, how many of these things do we actually just start using and at least apply our operational controls to it so that we can safely use it, versus just truly blocking things, which to me, I think is a bigger risk.
Brad, you said that last year's numbers were higher, right? That shadow IT was a bigger risk and now it's dropped some?
No. I think, and actually, I don't know if we asked this question the year before. I don't recall. Okay. But it seems to be a pretty known problem at this point. Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if it is a number that starts to decline, only because there is such an awareness of the fact that you really can't allow the wild, wild west to develop. And so, to Mike's point, offering something to let people get started so there isn't that I'm missing out, I don't have the latest and greatest. Give people something to work with and get your environment going, because if you don't, then the shadow AI takes root. So you'll always have, the exceptional person that's out finding the latest and greatest thing that comes out. But as an organization as a whole, if you keep people on track with the newer things that are coming out and you give them things, I think the push is you can't take the types of cycles and analysis to do like we've had in the past. Decision-making, choice points, you're going to have to be a bit more aggressive. You're going to have to do your pilots. You're going to have to let them try things, because if you don't, they're going to tend toward shadow IT or shadow AI like they did shadow IT. And it's easier with AI. It's more possible. Shadow IT was, you had to have some skills. You had to have an organization that could pull those kind of resources together. And, it was a little bit more difficult to build. Whereas shadow AI, pretty much anybody can become a shadow AI organization individually or with a small group. It's instantaneous. So I think that's the real risk, is that it's so easy now.
I agree with that. And I definitely agree with, you want to give your organization the best tools that they can work with. And I don't think that's specific to AI. I just think in general, you want to enable the success of your people. Like, I always felt as a department leader, like my job is to make sure that my team has the best tools available to them to get their job done. And so we should all be working towards that as companies. But I think in order for companies to enable true agentic workflows, monitoring of AI use is going to have to be really strong. And there are companies out there that are starting to do that. You can use telemetry to see what people are doing in their own work computers and have monitoring on what AI is doing. And I think that it's going to be, I do wonder whether this will decrease as we add more monitoring to just see what AI is doing to enable those autonomous workflows.
Good. So let's I want to make sure we talk a little bit about value. So let's skip ahead and talk about a little bit about where legal ops teams are already seeing real value. I think the first question you have to ask is what are objectives, right? Like we're you know, if you're going to find, where are you trying to find value? What are your priorities? And most of our audience said that one of their top 3 priorities is efficiency and performance. Not surprising that cost savings is number 2. I'm a little surprised that cost savings is this far behind. And again, pressure from executive leadership is a big number as well. So, like, do you guys think are these the right things? Like, is this where a lot of departments are likely to find value from these tools?
So I think if efficiency, performance, I would actually put speed in that same bucket, are very, like, it's just inherent in the nature of what AI does and how it does it. What I think is theoretically going to change is as people get used to using AI in let's say the basic use cases, which are all the speed use cases, I can do the same thing, but I can do it faster. I think AI has true transformative power. So I'll give you an example in the negotiation space. Like before, I could just talk to my team and say like, oh, what have you been negotiating? Where are you having problems? And I could learn from conversation. But with AI, arguably, I could go into all of the negotiations and see what comments consistently, what's the nature of comments that consistently flipped the narrative and led to the counterparty accepting my changes, right? True data-driven insights into what negotiation strategies work well and which ones don't work well, and use that to shape how we negotiate as a company. That's a transformative action. And I think that the real value from organizations are going to be there in the future. But I think right now we're still at the beginning of adoption. And so we're still just learning on the speed. Cost savings, I don't think it's ever, like, nobody's really proven out cost savings yet. And I think that as we move towards, we saw an announcement in the news recently about moving from seat-based pricing to consumption-based pricing. AI is not going to drive a lot of cost savings, is my opinion, especially because people stumble when they use AI. And right now there's not there with seat-based pricing, there wasn't a cost to that stumbling because it was free. You just had a seat. You didn't have to worry about it. But it's interesting as we go to consumption-based pricing, how that's going to have to change how we empower our users and our team members to use AI so that, our token use doesn't go sky high, our consumption use doesn't go sky high, because those mistakes in use, oh, I asked for something and it was wrong. It's going to be like using outside counsel, right? Like if you ask outside counsel for something, you're not clear on what you're looking for, you'll have spent a lot of money for something that doesn't have as much value as you wanted. And I think AI use is going to be the same. So I don't think we're going to have a ton of cost savings, except that we can start, except in the personnel space, and that we can use.
I think part of it is we don't have the quantitative benchmarks to be able to determine the cost savings. I mean, other than outside counsel spend, most departments don't have dollars and cents against a lot of the work that gets done. So the idea of targeting efficiency and performance, there's I don't want to call it hope, but there's the target that if you increase efficiency and performance, and I saw it in one of the comments in the chat, you're actually impacting the number of people you need, the actual staffing levels that are required, because all of a sudden the work can get done by 3 people instead of 4. And so now you allocate that 4th person to fill the job that you just would have posted and hired a 5th person. Now you're reallocating your 4th person from the other work to do this. So you end up having cost savings, but they're a flow down from producing the efficiency and performance. And I think that's why it's being targeted, because it's the area where we can at least measure how many of things are people doing? How much of stuff are people doing? How fast, to your point on speed, Laurie, is it a factor in there? How fast are they doing it so that I know how many of those people I need? And then that becomes a cost savings, but it's a flow down effect.
I don't know if I agree with that. I put AI in the same category as all these other life efficiencies that have graced us, like email and the washing machine and the dishwasher and all of these things that are supposed to save us time have increased the volume of work that we're doing. And I think what AI does is it's going to enable businesses to move so much faster. But if you're moving so much faster, you still need more headcount to meet those speed
But
obligations.
would you need as many more headcounts? So is your multiplier the same as the number of people you're adding? I think AI is going to make that an exponential. And so yes, you are going to have more work and there's going to be more loaded on, but the growth pattern of people versus
Yes.
the growth pattern of work, it's gonna make that K.
So it's
Whereas
like future cost savings, not
yeah,
current
so
cost savings.
it's a long-term growth cost savings analysis rather than a I've saved two people today. It's because nobody's cutting, you're not going to fire two people because you got an AI on board.
And I think to add to that last point is I think also measuring that eventual savings is more of like a value proposition of saying we've shifted a lot of this work to more higher value work now.
Yes.
So it's not a cost savings, but now maybe we are not sending X amount to outside counsel because our in-house team is actually working on more higher value work. Because I completely agree with what you're saying. Like it's the classic problem of you introduce an intake tool, now we have a lot more work coming in the door because people know to go to an intake tool to ask for help. So I completely agree. I don't think you're going to get away with just, cutting spend that easily.
So guys, we only have a couple of minutes left. So what I'm going to do, if it's all right, is I'm going to just cover a handful more slides sort of in a row and then just kick it back to you all for maybe a final thought overall from each of you. So um, we just talked about this. We are not yet able to demonstrate tangible cost savings driven by AI. Most of as you just described, most of our folks agree that you can't do that. And for me, I'll just say I personally understand why we don't track time and never track time in law departments. I understand that a lot of law department lawyers are refugees from law firms, and part of the reason they came was they hated that. But I wonder if in the long term that will have turned out to be a tactical error to not have much tracking on what your lawyers are doing all the time. That would have made this a lot easier. Almost everybody does expect Gen AI to enable them to bring work in-house. That seems to be the big, I don't know if use case is the right term, but a big objective, and people believe in that. Most everybody thinks that wider adoption of Gen AI will lower their law firm spend. I think Mike and you guys there's some counterexamples. I'm not sure I believe that. And I think when you start thinking about what, especially like in the litigation realm, what like the plaintiff's bar is doing with AI that is going to drive up your outside counsel spend, I wonder if AI on a whole isn't going to actually have the opposite effect on us all. I think it'll be interesting to watch. About 50-50, a little bit better on, or 2/3 maybe, say that that firms will increase their use of AFAs or modified billing for work augmented with Gen AI. And I think I'll say I personally think that ultimately they're going to have to. I mean, the Gen AI companies have figured out how to do it by going to per token licenses rather than per seat licenses, right? And we're going to have to, firms in a way are going to have to do the same. Like they can't bill hourly for stuff that takes less time, but doesn't necessarily, but provides more value, arguably. So I think that's where we're heading. So let's, and then the final question, which is maybe a good segue to some final thoughts, 30 seconds each, is I believe the value of legal services will go up if Gen AI is integrated. About 2/3 of our folks, a little better, say that, maybe 3/4 say that they agree with this, that value of legal services will go up. So ladies first, why don't we start with Diane right now? Diane, take a minute or a little less and just what's your final thought here?
I'm very heartened to see that we are focused on efficiency and the things that we can accomplish with AI. I think it leads you to asking the right questions, which is what are you trying to accomplish so that you use the tool in its best and finest way. But I hope that everyone knows that the hard work is still looking at your processes It's breaking everything down and making sure that you know how your work is done, how it needs to get done, what your outputs need to look like, so that when you apply AI, you're getting something that's cohesive across your organization, that it's consistent. And we didn't get a whole lot into the transparency and data governance, but I think it's very critical that you have to be able to have that level of dependability in your outputs. So look at your processes and make sure you're getting a tool that is doing something you want it to do, not just doing stuff that it can do.
Laurie?
I completely agree with what Diane said. I think that, I'd like to stop talking about AI and start talking about pain points again and dreams and finding the right tools for those. But I will say, I think vendor selection is more important than ever because the underlying technology is changing so quickly. What you should be looking for today is different from what we were looking for in the past. What we were looking for in the past was stability, and solving today's problems. And what you need to be looking for from vendors today is looking at speed of iteration, and not just whether they can meet today's needs, but whether we think they have the potential to meet tomorrow's needs. And I think it changes. I think that's really like how AI has shifted the market and I think that's true for business in general. Where you have to be much more proactive and think about how we can transform what we're doing. And I think that creativity as a trait is something that we should be increasing the number of people we hire who have a lot of creativity because of the potential to do pretty much anything you can imagine.
Mike, you want to bring us home?
You got it. So it seems like there's a lot of interest in the chat around tokens, and that was going to be my final thought here is that I think we're kind of at the doorstep of the token apocalypse, so to speak, where all of a sudden what's been a pretty easy subscription-based billing model will quickly change and pivot to an incredibly expensive model. And I think to what Diane and Laurie is saying exactly right. Getting closer to the use cases and really understanding what does it cost to do this right now before AI, to me, is going to be critical, because you can get token calculators right now and figure out what this stuff is going to cost, but I don't think enough people are doing that because they haven't had to. So I guess my parting advice would just be, I wouldn't jump into any substantial AI workflows if you don't know what the token costs are, because the moment you get that thing into production very soon this year, that's going to be a reality. And I think it's going to surprise a lot of organizations, and it's going to cause yet another kind of wave of friction of people not wanting to adopt it because they've been shut down or they've been throttled, and it's not performant anymore. So I think a lot of those things can be figured out before you turn those use cases on.
Great. Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Diane. Thank you, Laurie. Thanks to all our audience members for joining us today. And you can download this report to get all that cool data and lots of analysis too. So thank you, everybody, and look forward to next time. Take care.